Hello everyone, my name is Brittany and I'm here on behalf of Poor Boy Mechanics, and today I'm going to walk you through how to install a West Bar tail light on my 1997 Bayliner Capri. So prior to this video, we actually had already removed this part and took the bolts out. We were going to replace this last weekend, however, we accidentally got two left-hand sides. So when you're replacing trailer taillights, make sure you look what side you're getting and don't get two of the same side because they're color-coded to match up to each side. Before we start any project, we want to ensure that we have everything we need before we get started. So we are going to need a set of wire strippers, butt connectors, a pair of dikes. These actually are wire clippers plus crimpers. And because we are doing this on a boat trailer, we want to ensure that we get the marine heat shrink. This is actually specifically designated for waterproof and marine applications. So we have our taillight mount, and then we have our taillight. As you can see, there's a black side and a reflective side. So this reflective side is going to go on the outside, but before we can wire these three wires to the wiring harness, we're going to have to feed them through one of these two holes. To figure out which hole we're going to wire them through, we're going to take it and we're going to flip it upside down. And since we know that this is going to be the outside, we want to make sure that our reflective side stays on this side. As you can see, there's three different grooves that's going to use this hardware. And then we have four holes down here. So we're going to take it and we're going to line them up. And we're going to see that this hole and this hole is going to be used, leaving this innermost hole available to wire these three through. But before we can wire these three through, we're going to have to take the wire cutters and we're going to clip this off. That way we know that these three will fit through here. So now that we have our wires fed through, we're going to take our bolts and we're going to slide them in. And as you can see, there are these little grooves that actually fit the wires into. So we're going to take those and we're going to feed them down through. And this way that it actually sits flush against the mount. Okay, so we'll make sure that these are all the way through, and we're going to slide our bolts through the holes.
Let me catch up real quick. Yep, doesn't look like we're pinching, so that should be good.
Perfect. So then we're going to take these, twist them off. And then we're going to take...
Sweet.
So now that we have our nuts on our bolts, we're going to take our wrench and we are going to tighten it all the way down. All right. Double check this one. All right, and everything looks good. So now that we have our tail light bolted into our mount, we are going to wire these into our wiring harness. So we have white for our ground, we have green for our right turn signal and our stop, and brown for the running lights. So before we start any wiring maintenance, we want to ensure that we have no power connected to our trailer. So now it's time to figure out which butt connectors we need to use for our wiring. So for those people who don't know, wire gauge goes in reverse. So the higher your number, the smaller your wire. So our red is going to be 22 to 18 gauge wire. And then we have our blue, which is our 16 to 14 gauge wire. And then we have our yellow, which is 12 to 10 gauge wire. So our wiring falls in between the 16 to 14 gauge. So we're going to use the blue ones. Now that we've established that we're going to be using our blue butt connector, we want to make sure that the shrink wrap we use completely goes over our connector. So now that we've established that this is the shrink wrap we're going to be using, I'm actually going to cut it into 2 smaller pieces. That way we're not wasting all this shrink wrap on this small connector. So now I'm going to strip down all of my wires so that way I have enough exposed wire so when I feed them into my butt connectors and crimp them down, it'll create a clean contact. So I'm going to actually just go through and strip them all down to approximately the same length. Now that all of our wires have been stripped, I'm going to take our heat shrink and I'm going to slide them on the wire before we put any of our butt connectors on. Now this is going to be an important step to do because you want to make sure your heat shrink is on your wire before you do any of your crimping. So now I'm going to take my green wire and I'm going to line it up with my green. I'm going to kind of slightly twist this just a little bit just to make sure that all of the wires are together and they're not frayed. So then I'm going to slide this all the way in until it seats. And then I'm going to take this green one. Also, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to slightly twist it, make sure that all of the wires are together. And then slide that one in until it seats. So then I'm going to take my dikes or my crimpers. Then I'm going to rest it in the little half moon. And then I'm going to crimp that. Make sure that you have it all the way seated in there and then you don't jerk it so that way the wire doesn't pop out. Because then when you go to crimp it, it's not going to be all the way in there. So set it in there. And then we are going to crimp. Then I'm going to slide over. And then I'm going to crimp it again. Okay. And then I'm going to slightly pull on it, make sure that they are completely together. And then I'll be able to slide this over it and then shrink it down. So then I'm going to do that to all the other wires. So now all of our wires have been crimped together. Now all we have to do is slide our heat shrink in place and then get the heat gun. And this will be ready to go. And then all I have to do is take the taillight mount and bolt it back into place. So now I have my heat gun. I actually moved the other shrink wrap down. That way, when I'm shrinking this one in place, they're not going to start melting the other ones. So I'm actually going to make sure that it's centered. So that way both sides is getting about an equal amount. So about right there is center. So I'm going to turn it on to a low heat. I don't want to turn it up too high. Just double check. About right. Yeah, maybe there. There's there. There's there. Okay. So, like I said, I'm gonna turn it on low heat. That way it doesn't start melting the actual wire. I'm just going to slightly go back and forth until it shrinks down. As you can see, it's starting to melt. So let me turn it a little bit over so I can get this side. Trying to apply even heat all throughout. Until it's melted all the way down and the wire is completely not exposed to the element. So as I said before, we're going to feed these wires back into the trailer. So I'm gonna make sure that nothing pinches. Okay, and then we're gonna take this, we're gonna set it on top. So I'm actually going to go down and I'm going to pull it through a little bit, make sure all the wires are good. So now that this is on, I'm going to put in my bolts to secure this to the trailer.